Welcome to Pokemon's longest challenge, the Transfer Lock. What makes this the longest challenge? Well, it's a randomizer Nuzlocke in every single Pokemon game with a twist. Any Pokemon you catch throughout each game stays with you until it faints or is unusable due to Nuzlocke rules. We start in Generation 1 and play through each generation, and each generation gets a level boost. So by the time we reach Generation 4 or 5, we will constantly be massively under-leveled. This challenge is both difficult and long, so let's get straight into it. We start with Pokemon Red, and immediately get given the most important choice, our starter Pokemon. We have a simple choice between Onix, Scyther, and Farfetch'd. We pick Onix, and easily defeat our rival, who will carry his Scyther throughout the game. One major change is that of movesets. They are random, but still fitting the type of the Pokemon. This is paired alongside with other standard changes, and quite a few quality of life changes to fix the game a little bit better. We do the normal start of Gen 1 Pokemart task before getting our Pokedex, and then our first Pokeballs. So, if you're excited for this new video and series concept, make sure you go ahead, hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get into it. I want to build out my team immediately, and our first encounter on Route 1 is a Zubat, who we catch and name Nox. Our next encounter came on Route 2, where we ended up encountering something special. Very special. A Mew. Yep, that's right, Mew. And not only that, but we catch it. We name it WoW, and then go and fail to catch a Pokemon on Route 22, but we don't really care, so instead we level up our Pokemon and battled Blue. He had a bug-type combo of Pinsir and Scyther, which was no match for Polished, who took them both out in one hit. Despite this early success, our first encounter in the Viridian Forest was a disaster. Not only did the Tentacruel take out Nox, but we also weren't able to catch it. So now instead of having a possible 5 Pokemon, we just have 2. However, that sort of worked out for us because Polished and WoW became a bit over-leveled through battles through Viridian. Eventually we made our way to Pewter City and take on the first gym. Brock decided to have an all-electric team, and a couple of digs with Polished was all it took to earn our first badge. We continued onwards to Route 3 towards Mount Moon in hopes of getting a few new Pokemon. However, our Route 3 encounter was a Gengar that I took out after running out of Pokeballs, but we did manage to get a Tentacool from the guy who sells you a Magikarp. We named it Manowar and continued to Mount Moon, where the frustrations continued as our encounter was Charizard, and again we ran out of Pokeballs. Team Rocket was infiltrating Mount Moon for some reason, and one of the grunts had an Articuno, but Polish handled it quite easily. Another hiker had a Mew, so seemingly this Pokemon's a lot more common than in the base game. Eventually we picked up the fossil and headed to Cerulean City. We picked up a lot of Pokeballs, so we can catch some Pokemon on the routes around us. On Route 4 we finally got some luck and catched a Weepinbell before taking on our rival again. First we took out his Electrode, then came out his Lickitung, which we didn't one-shot, and then it slapped us hard with an Earthquake. Luckily we survived and took it out instead. But his last 2 Pokemon were Butterfree and Scyther, and were easily dispatched by Polish, who again swept Blue's team. In our first battle on Nugget Bridge, we lose our brand new Weepinbell, which was fun, before headed to Route 24 to catch a Kingler. Mr. Krabs joins the team, but we have a lot less luck on Route 25 when we encounter a Zapdos, and yet again run out of Pokeballs. We then meet some weird guy called Bill before taking on Misty. Misty starts out with a Pinsir, who's easily beaten by Polished, but our next Pokemon is a Hitmonchan, so we switch into WoW, who thrashes our way to a second gym badge. While I'm frustrated that I'm missing out on a lot of Pokemon at this point, it is more frustrating that every Pokemon we do seem to get is a water type, as our Route 5 encounter is a Goldeen, who we catch and call Koi. Koi goes straight into the PC. However, our luck finally seems to change a bit on Route 6 when we catch a Grimer, name it Sludgy. Its moveset's terrible, but honestly, I'll take anything right now. When we do make it to Vermilion City, we immediately head into the Diglett's cave to get another encounter, and catch ourselves a Magnemite, which we name Magnet, before headed further east to Route 11 and catch a Golbat, which we named Nox 2. Now this encounter doesn't count as dupes because our Zubat was taken out, and isn't an active member of our team or box. This means we could catch a Zubat or Golbat again. Now, as we enter the SSN, we finally have a full team, and backups in the PC that we can rely on. With this security, we level up with the trainers on the ship and eventually find ourselves battling Blue yet again. He starts off with a Primate, who one-shots Man of War with Hyper Beam. What a great start. I rely on WoW to take it out, and his next Pokemon, Lapras. Mr. Krabs comes in to take out his next Pokemon Golem, before Polished is able to take out Scyther. We are able to get cut and watch as the SSN leaves and will never return. Our next challenge is the Vermilion Gym Battle against Lieutenant Surge. The gym leader starts out with a Muck, who Mr. Krabs Hyper Beams out of existence. Next was a Weezing, who was a lot bulkier but was still taken out by Hyper Beam. And then he had a more familiar Pokemon in Voltorb. So we brought Polished out, used Dig, and we take our third gym badge. Before our long track back to Cerulean, we pick up the HM for Flash. And then on Route 9, catch ourselves a Hypno. We call it Creep, and use it for Flash. We next head to the Rock Tunnel, and miss out on yet another encounter in Dratini, but it's no matter as we finally make our way to Lavender Town unscathed. Before immediately catching a Pokemon on Route 7. Our encounter is Pinsir, and this time we do finally catch it, and we name it Gregor. One of the trainers on Route 7 also has a Mewtwo, which was a fun time, and nearly took out WoW. Then we made our way to Celadon City. We immediately picked up the free Eevee, which turned out to be another Onix. The Dupes clause is only active if we have currently that Pokemon alive in our team or box, but since this is a static Pokemon, there isn't much we can do about it other than take it. So we head to the gym, where I forgot to record. I do apologize. With this technical blunder behind us, we took on the Team Rocket hideout, picked up the lift key, and for the first time, challenged Giovanni. Gregor was easily able to take out Exeggutor and Snorlax, but Giovanni's last Pokemon was a Farfetch'd. So a quick switch into Magnet was the solution, and barely surviving 2 before using Thunderbolt and taking out Giovanni. We then picked up some more Pokeballs since we now have a few more encounters coming up, the first of which is one we bypassed on Route 8, which was yet another water type. This time a Poliwhirl, and we caught it and called it Swirl. Back in Lavender Town, we entered the Pokemon Tower, where our rival awaits us for yet another battle. His first Pokemon is Lapras, so we switch into Magnet, who nearly gets taken out with a Hydro Pump. So we switch back into Gregor, who uses Thunder. However, Lapras gets off the Hydro Pump and does way too much damage. WoW then comes out and finally takes the Lapras down. The rest of the battle was much easier, as the next Pokemon was Magikarp, who got caught in the Thrash. Poliwhirl was next, and so I switched into a healed up Magnet, who used Thunderbolt to take it down. Rattata was next, Thunderbolt did the job, before switching into Polished to take on his Scyther, and we took it down with Rock Slide. With our hardest rival battle up to this point finished, we continued up the tower, where eventually Magnet evolved. We took on the Ghost, who turned out to be Sludgy's cousin, and saved Mount Fuji from Team Rocket. Now, with the Poke Flute in hand, we are able to get past the sleeping Snorlax. The first one we encountered happened to be a Wigglytuff, which we caught and named Yum-Ta, after our Guildmaster friend from Mystery Dungeon. And it seems we'll get a chance to use our new Pokemon sooner than expected, as a random fisherman on Route 12 had a Dugtrio with Fisher, which took down Mr. Krabs. While Gregor got revenge for us, it would be another sad moment as we lost Gregor as well, later on Route 13, to a Dragonite. After this second loss of team member in a matter of minutes, I snuck my way into Fuchsia City, not knowing which Pokemon would replace our latest fallen team member. This turned out to be Koi, the Goldeen we'd caught all the way back on Route 4, who we leveled up using the trainers we'd bypassed earlier. We also entered the Savari Zone, but missed out on the Pokémon. We did pick up the HM for Surf, the Golden Teeth, and then the HM for Strength. We also picked up a Psyduck as our encounter for Fuchsia City, and then a Taurus on Route 18. And once we completed all of that, we took on the Fuchsia Gym. Koga started with his own Goldeen, so we sent out Magnet, and a Thunderbolt later, it had been taken out. Golbat came out next, and was gone just as quickly after another Thunderbolt. Jigglypuff was next, so we put in Polished, who took a couple of Rock Slides, and then we were down to Koga's final Pokemon, Muck, who almost went down to an Earthquake before hitting us with Aurora Beam, which left Polished on 4 HP. Luckily, we were faster, so one more Earthquake was all we needed for our 5th badge. We headed back to Saffron City, where we first took on the Dojo Master in hopes to pick up a free encounter. The Dojo Master wasn't a difficult challenge, and we ended up getting ourselves a Gyarados, which was really helpful as it could learn Fly. However, our next challenge was at the Silphco, where a lot happened. First was Sludgy evolving into an even bigger Sludgy, before Koi evolved as well. We made our way to the top where we faced a trainer with a Zapdos. We sent out Polish to take it out, which worked. Before then, a Mewtwo came out, and one of the saddest things happened. Mewtwo hit Ice Beam, and down went our starter. Annoyed and angry, we used our rage with Yumta and said goodbye to a hero of our early game adventure. While we do have another Onix in the PC, it just isn't the same as the one we started our adventure with. But there is no time to be sad because we have another rival battle. So, just for Polished, let's destroy him yet again. He started with a Charizard, and that was easy work for Koi. Pharaoh came out and we switched into Magnet. One Thunderbolt was all that was needed to take it down, and then Ponyta came out. Even though we took it out in one hit, I am so glad we are not part Steel yet. We also one-shot Blue's Golbat and Scyther with Thunderbolt to completely destroy him. Then we ended up getting another free Pokemon afterwards, which was a Gengar. Also a nice callback to one of the first Pokemon we missed out on. While it will stay in our team a little bit longer, it isn't as strong right now as the rest of our team, and will eventually go in the PC. We make it all the way to another big battle, this time against Giovanni, who starts with a Pidgeot, but takes a Magnet Thunderbolt in no time to take it down. Next up is Kakuna, and I switched into Sludgy, who took it down without an issue. Then, a couple of Earthquakes later, we took down Krabby, and the final Pokemon was Aerodactyl. So, I swapped into Koi, and it was left on 1 HP. We healed up, we tanked Aerodactyl's next move, and we were able to take Giovanni down once again. Koi also learned Recover, which became a helpful move later on. We picked up the Master Ball from the Silphco owners, and made our way to take on the Saffron City gym leader, Sabrina. Sabrina started off with her own Mew, which turned out to be her strongest Pokemon. Yumta initially struggled, but eventually, and a bit of potion spamming, we let off a Hyper Beam, which left it on 1 HP. Mew nearly took us down, but we tanked the hit and finished Mew off. Koi came out for her next Pokemon, Cubone, which was one-shot by Surf. Geodude found the same fate, before we swapped into Magnet to take out her final Pokemon, Spearow. And with that, we only have 2 badges left. Our next step was to head back to Pallet Town and attempt to catch some Pokemon. We ended up catching a Dugong on Route 21, who we named Gnar, and while I didn't know it at this moment, it would become our replacement for Polished, who we still really hadn't replaced at this point. When we made it to Cinnabar Island, we caught a Cubone with the Super Rod, and finally got a Pokemon from our fossil that we got all the way back in Mount Moon. This turned out to be a Weezing, but since we already have a Poison type in the team, we decided to put in Gnar and level up our team before we take on Blaine. Luckily, the Pokemon Mansion is a good place for that, and we also ended up picking up an Executor. However, the moves we have access to with that Pokemon aren't great, so Coco stays in the PC. we pick up the gym key and enter our next challenge. Blaine started out with his own Executor, but we had a trick up our sleeve. We were able to teach Magnet the move Flamethrower, and that came in quite handy in taking out Blaine's first Pokemon. He then sent out his own Wigglytuff, which, while we did a lot of damage with Thunderbolt, it used Explosion and nearly took Magnet down. Next was a Gyarados, and I'm starting to think Blaine has completely copied our team. Well, that is until he sends out his final Pokemon, a level 47 Machamp. We swapped into WoW, who was our only real hope. Luckily, WoW could tank both hits and hit back hard. A couple of Psybeams was all that was needed to obtain our 7th gym badge. Now we really are on the home stretch, with only one gym leader to go. One last one in Viridian City. One of the first gym trainers we took on ended up having a Mewtwo, which was fun, but we make it to the gym leader, who happens to be Giovanni, and we take him on for one last time. He started using a usual suspect, a Rhydon, which Gnar took down easily with a Surf. His next Pokemon was Caterpie, which was easy for Ice Beam, and so was his Dragonair. Snorlax was the next, and everything got scary here. Surf took Snorlax to half health, and then Snorlax used Rock Slide, leaving us on 22 health. But it's obvious we can just take it out with another Surf. Except that's not what happened. However, Giovanni, for some reason, used a Guard Spec, and we were able to take Snorlax down. Then swapped into WoW to take out his final Pokemon, Clefairy. And we've done it. All 8 gym badges. We just have one final challenge. The Elite Four and Champion. But before then, our rival challenges us. But we were in good spirits and ready to destroy him again. He starts with Pinsir and we start with Magnet. One Flamethrower is all we need to take it down. But Pidgeotto meets a similar fate with Thunderbolt. Next is Vulpix, so we send out Koi, who gets burned by Fire Blast. But it doesn't really matter. Surf one-shots it, and the next Pokemon to come out is a Lickitung, who then gets taken out by 2 Surfs. Clefairy is next, and this time we use Sludgy. And a couple of Earthquakes later, we see Blue's final Pokemon and starter, Scyther. We use Toxic on Scyther, and then switch into Gnar. We tank the Sky Attack, and I decided to switch out, this time into Yumta. Scyther missed the next Sky Attack, and we used Hyper Beam. It didn't take it out, and Scyther used Mirror Move, and we just survived on 34 health. But then the poison takes it down in the end, and we defeat Blue once again. And that's probably our hardest battle against our rival. We make our way through the gates on Route 23 and catch a Shelder in the process. When we make it to Victory Road, we catch a Butterfree. We kept doing the strength puzzle and battled the various trainers in Victory Road, which really weren't that tough, and eventually made it to the Moltres encounter, which turned out to be a Nidorino. We got it using the Master Ball, and then finally made it to the Pokemon League. After a few preparations and getting some full restores, and leveling our Pokemon to level 54, we entered the first chamber of the Elite Four. Lorelei was our first challenge, and she started off with a Goldeen. That wasn't much of an issue for Magnet. However, her next Pokemon was a bit trickier, being a Magneton. Thunder did a lot on Sludgy, and the constant paralysis wasn't fun to deal with. We had to use up a lot of full restores almost immediately into the Elite Four, and I was starting to worry. Luckily, we got a break. Magneton missed, and we were able to land an Earthquake, but it didn't take it down. After a while, we did finally take down Magneton with another Earthquake. Charmeleon was next, and we stayed out, but it burned us while using Fire Blast. And that didn't help, and another full restore was used. Charmeleon then went down to one final Earthquake, and Lorelei sent out Poliwrath. Out came WoW, who used Psybeam, and we hit it with a crit, before a fat Pikachu came out and was promptly taken down. And that was just our first Elite Four challenge. And they're supposed to only get harder. Well, that is what I expected going into the next Elite Four member, Bruno. And based on the first Pokemon, it seemed like that would be the case. Koi was able to deal with Moltres, who actually wasn't much of a threat. Pidgeot came out next, and the obvious switch to Magnet was inevitable. One Thunderbolt later, and we were looking at Bruno's third Pokemon already, Amistar. But we didn't look at it for long because of Thunderbolt. Magmar came out next, so we decided to paralyze it before switching into Koi, who tanked a Fire Blast. This is where Recover came in handy. We took out the Magmar with a Surf. Considering Bruno's final Pokemon was a Metapod, it wasn't a surprise that we would win. And we make our way to the third Elite Four member, Agatha, who started out with Electabuzz. We had WoW up front, and despite hitting 2 Psybeams, Agatha switched out her Pokemon and sent out a Clefairy, who took the next attack, which took it to half health. One turn later, and Clefairy was down. Electabuzz came back out, and we finally took that down too. Her third Pokemon is Wigglytuff, so we healed Paralysis only for Agatha to switch into Porygon. Porygon used Bide, so I switched into Magnet and used Thunder Wave as to not attack the Porygon. We then used Thunderbolt to take it out when it was safe. Wigglytuff came back out, and 2 Thunderbolts later we'd taken that down. Her final Pokemon was Gastly, which actually did a lot of damage to Magnet, so I swapped into Gnar, who took it down with an Ice Beam. So with 3 Elite Four members down, we logically just had one left, Lance. Lance started off with a fitting Pokemon in Dratini, which Gnar immediately took out. Magnet came in to take on Poliwhirl, and one-shot that with Thunderbolt. Sludgy came in to take on the Weezing, and Earthquake nearly took it out, but because of accuracy drops, we didn't risk anything and swapped back into Magnet. Flamethrower took it down, and then Graveler came out. Another swap, this time to Koi, worked out as Surf one-shot Graveler, before we saw Lance's final Pokemon, another Wigglytuff. Koi took down that in about 2 Surfs, and what looked like a hard challenge based on the battle with Lorelei turned out to not be so bad in the end. But now we have one final challenge, the Champion, who also happens to be our rival, Blue. And so we get one final time to take him down once and for all. We start off with Gnar, and he starts out with his Ditto. Ditto was no match for Gnar, and fell after 2 moves. Charizard came out next, and despite Fire Punch being a strong move, we one-shot it with Surf. Scyther was next, but this wasn't his starter Scyther. That fell for an Ice Beam. His next Pokemon was an Ivysaur, so I used this time to heal Gnar, and then take out Ivysaur with another Ice Beam. Next was Diglett, who also got one shot with Ice Beam, before finally his ace, Scyther, which also couldn't survive an Ice Beam. And with that, we swept the Champion with a Dewgong. While Oak berates his grandson, we become the champion, and I reflect on this challenge. I used some great Pokemon in this adventure, and I had a lot of fun with the randomness of it all. Gnar, Magnet, WoW, Koi, Sludgy, and Yumta might have been the Pokemon we finished with, but they weren't our only team members. And while at times this challenge felt easy, by no means did it not have its moments. And that brings me to one thing. The challenge only gets harder from here. In every game after this, the levels increase, and so does the amount of available Pokemon. And so, I hope to see you in the next part of the Generation Transfer Lock.